Hey guys, I've been playing a lot of PBE lately since set 5 is coming out in a few days. I got to a pretty high rank in Hyperroll, so I think I have a good understanding of what's currently strong and what's not. In this video, I put together a list of the strongest early game boards you could play, what items you could slam, and the late game boards you can transition to depending on your opener. I hope you guys enjoy. So the first opener I'm going to be talking about is the Legionnaire opener. The Legionnaire opener consists of 2 Legionnaire units plus 1. So for your third unit, you could play anything as long as you're 2-star or if the unit is individually good. I'm just going to be picking KAZAKS. And for your level 4, you could just play GRAGAS. KAZAKS is a really good individual unit early because what ends up happening is he jumps to the backline and he isolates their carry, one-shotting them usually, winning you the fight. In the early game, usually you want to clump up your units in the backline to play around KAZAKS. If you yourself are playing KAZAKS, you don't want to do that because if you clump up your units in the backline, KAZAKS is going to jump to the back of their team and he's going to get targeted first and die before doing any damage. So if you're playing KAZAKS yourself, you actually want to frontline your units and clump so he doesn't die instantly. At level 5, if you hit a NUNU, you have the option of playing 3 Abomination. If you're playing this variation, one very good item you can slam is ZYRA. ZYRA gives you a lot of value if you're playing Abomination because once your NUNU dies with ZYRA, you're going to get a ZYRA and then your Scion's going to spawn with ZYRA and he's going to run to the backline, die, and summon another ZYRA portal. It's a really strong mid-game board you can play to get you to level 8. Good items you could slam on KALISTA are Bloodthirster, Guinsoo's, Deathblade. KALISTA is pretty flexible in holding your 80 items and she actually does a lot of damage. And it's also good to stack KALISTA because if you're playing Abomination, all your 80 items are going to go on your Scion. And Bloodthirster is actually really good on Scion because it gives them some sustain at the end of the fight. Additionally, if you don't hit 3 Abomination, you could just play a 4 Legionnaire mid-game. So in this case, you're just playing 4 Legionnaire and 2 Dawnbringers because you have Riven and GRAGAS. And this is a pretty easy transition into DRAVEN because DRAVEN himself is a Legionnaire. So he's going to get a lot of benefits from the Legionnaire buff. Or if you don't hit DRAVEN, you could just pivot this board into APHELIOS because these are best in slot items for APHELIOS. So now I'm going to be talking about the Brawler opener, which consists of GRAGAS and WARWICK. For your third unit, a very strong individual unit you could play is KAZAKS because it gives you 2 Dawnbringer and KAZAKS himself is a very good unit. At level 4, you could just play a random unit that gives you more damage because you're playing Brawlers, you're going to need more damage. So in this case, if you're already playing KAZAKS, you just play 2 Assassin with LeBlanc. You don't have to play an Assassin backline. You could also play a Renewer backline. You could play Lissandra and you could also play Soraka. This gives you 2 Dawnbringer, 2 Brawler, and 2 Renewer. For this variation, you usually want to be stacking Lissandra with all your AP items like Blue Buff, Jewel Gauntlet, Death Cap. If you're stacking those items on Lissandra, you're probably going to be pivoting your board into Karma or VLKOZ. If you don't play the Renewer variation, you could also play 2 Rangers. VAYNE is good. And then you put in VARUS for 2 Rangers. And at level 5, you could just splash in a Forgotten unit because VAYNE will most likely be your carry in this case. So a third Forgotten unit you could play could just be something like a Victor. If you're playing the Ranger variation, you want to stack VAYNE with attack speed items because she scales really well off attack speed. Guinsoo's is good. Runan's is good. If you're stacking attack speed items, a good board you could pivot into is Jax, APHELIOS, or DRAVEN. Additionally, instead of going for this variation, you could also look to play around 4 Brawlers mid-game. 4 Brawlers is a very strong board mid-game, so you want to be looking for Set and you want to be looking for NUNU. This gives you 4 Brawlers and you just play any backline you want. A very good item with Brawler frontline is Sunfire Cape. If you have 4 Brawlers and Sunfire Cape, you have a very stable board that could get you to level 7 or 8, depending on how strong the rest of the lobby is. So now I'm going to be talking about the Ranger opener. If you're playing the Ranger opener, you want to be carrying your VAYNE to hold all your 80 items. And VAYNE alone kind of sucks without the Forgotten buff. So usually if you're playing VAYNE, you usually want 3 Forgotten. So there's 2 different Forgotten variations you could play. You could play the Brawler Forgotten variation, in which case you're running Warwick, so you want another Brawler. Or you could also choose to play around your Thresh instead. So if you're playing Thresh, you want another Knight. A very good Knight is Leona. If you get a lot of VAYNEs early, like maybe like 7 or 8 VAYNEs, you can consider slow rolling for VAYNE 3 and playing around 6 Forgotten late game. If you're playing that variation, the items you want to stack on VAYNE are Guinsoo's, Runan's, and Jewel Gauntlet. And late game, you want to play around 6 Forgotten, and then you fill the rest of your board with random legendaries. If you don't want to 3-star your VAYNE, you could just play VAYNE as an early game unit. And at level 7 or 8, you want to switch your carry into APHELIOS, DRAVEN, or Jax, depending on what you hit and what your items are. So the next opener I'm going to be talking about is the Hellion opener. In the Hellion opener, you're just playing 3 out of the 4 Hellion units you could get early game. The 4 units are Kennen, Poppy, ZIGGS, and KLED. In my opinion, the most important one is ZIGGS because that's where most of your damage is going to be coming from. So in this case, since Kennen is a bit more hard to get, I'm just going to drop Kennen and play these 3 Hellions instead. For your level 4, since ZIGGS is your primary damage, you want to splash in a second Spellweaver. So any Spellweaver is good, but I personally like Victor. At level 5, if you hit a Lulu, you have the opportunity to play 5 Hellions. So in this case, if you're playing Lulu, you want to look for Kennen. This will give you 5 Hellions and is a very, very strong board. But usually you're not going to hit 5 Hellions, so a more likely board you could probably play is just play Victor, and then you just play a second Knight to round out your synergies with Poppy. So Thresh is good. And the perfect unit you could play at level 6 is Hecarim, because Hecarim is a Forgotten, which gives you the 3 Forgotten buff. And Hecarim is also a Cavalier, which also buffs up your KLED. If you're playing this variation, most of the time you want to stack ZIGGS, because ZIGGS, again, is where most of your damage is coming from. And the single best item you can put on ZIGGS is Blue Buff, because of his low mana. And you just want to stack all your AP items on him. So Jewel Gauntlet is good, Gunblade is good. If you have Blue Buff on ZIGGS, most of the time you want to try and play around Karma late game, because Karma is the single best late game unit that could use Blue Buff. But you could also play VELKOZ with this board as well. Just any carry that revolves around an AP carry, so VELKOZ or Karma. And a board like this is actually pretty strong, and it could get you to level 8. So now I'm going to be talking about the Draconic opener. The Draconic opener is an opener that happens when you get dealt a ZYRA or ASHE early. In this case, I'm just going to be playing ZYRA. And UDYR is another Draconic that's very, very easy to get. The hard Draconic to get is going to be Set, because he's a 2-cost unit. So usually in a spot like this, you want to pre-level to get a higher chance of hitting Set. So if you hit the Set, you just play 3 Draconic all the way until stage 3-2. So this board is actually not that strong, because it doesn't have any synergies that power you up. So most of the time, you might end up lose streaking all the way until stage 3-2. So in a spot like this, you usually want to position your units to kill off as many units as possible before you lose the fight. For your level 4, you just play second Spellweaver, depending on whether you have ZYRA or ASHE. Because I'm playing ZYRA, I'm just going to play a second Spellweaver. So ZIGGS is a really, really good unit for Draconic, because ZIGGS is really good at killing off an individual unit before you lose the fight. So at stage 3-2, you probably got a lot of Draconic orbs, and chances are you're pretty close to 2-starring your ZYRA. In my opinion, what you could do is you want to roll down at stage 3-2 to stabilize, maybe hit 1 or 2 repairs so you don't bleed out too early. And at that point, you want to consider whether or not you want to play reroll Draconic, or you want to pivot your board into something else. So if you plan on playing reroll Draconic, you're most likely going to try and 3-star your ZYRA, because ZYRA is the carry in the Draconic comp. And good items you can stack on her are like Shojin, Gwinsu's. If you don't plan on playing the Draconic reroll comp, you can just pivot your board at level 7 or 8, depending on what your items are. So if you're stacking ZYRA, usually you're going to have a lot of AP items on her, so you want to pivot your board into a Karma or VELKOZ board. Or if you're playing ASHE, you may have a lot of attack speed or AD items on ASHE. In that case, you want to pivot your board into an AD comp like APHELIOS or DRAVEN. So now I'm going to be talking about the Assassin opener. The Assassin opener happens when you get dealt a early game Nocturne or Katarina from your orbs. So if you get Nocturne, you want to stack all your attack speed and AD items on him. And if you get Katarina, IE is really good on her, Blue Buff is really good on her. So in this case, I'm just going to pick Nocturne. And if you're playing an Assassin, the best Assassin you could pair him with is KAZIX. And you need some kind of frontline early game. So I like the Brawler frontline with GRAGAS and WARWICK, because GRAGAS gives you 2 Dawnbringers when you're playing KAZIX. And for your level 6 board, you can consider playing 4 Assassins with LeBlanc and Katarina. So if you're stacking attack speed on Nocturne, most of the time you're going to be pivoting into an APHELIOS or DRAVEN board. If you have a blue buff on Katarina, you can consider pivoting your board into Karma, because Karma uses blue buff really, really well. If you get an Assassin spat, you could consider playing 6 Assassins with Soraka carry. This build is really good because Soraka, if she has the Assassin spat with 6 Assassin, she just casts and she instantly one-shots your whole team. You want to swap out your frontline carries at the end of the game if you're playing this comp. Otherwise, you can just pivot your board into a standard fast 8 board. So now I'm going to be talking about the Forgotten opener. For the Forgotten opener, you're just playing 3 Forgotten units with VAYNE carry. So Hecarim, Warwick, and VAYNE. For level 4, you want to splash in a second Cavalier or second Brawler. So GRAGAS is fine. If you don't have Warwick, you want to play a second Cavalier. Alternatively, you could just play a second Knight because you have Thresh, because he's also a Forgotten. And at level 5, you want to play a second Ranger because VAYNE is going to be your carry. And because you're stacking VAYNE, usually you want to pivot this board into an APHELIOS or DRAVEN board, depending on your items. So instead of VAYNE, you could also play Victor because he's also a Forgotten. In this case, you don't want to be playing VARUS, you just want to be playing a second Spellweaver, so ZIGGS is good. In this case, you want to be stacking your Victor with all your AP items. Another possibility is, if you're not playing Victor, you could play Katarina carry. If you're playing Katarina carry, you want to be playing a second Assassin, so KAZIX is good. So if you're playing Katarina carry, you could consider stacking blue buff on her. If you have blue buff on her, you want to pivot your board into a Karma board. Or if you put 80 items on her, you could just pivot your board into a standard 80 comp as well. So now I'm going to be talking about the Skirmisher opener. The Skirmisher opener happens when you get dealt a 3-star Skirmisher from your early game orb. This could be Nidalee, Lee Sin, Pantheon. In this case, I'm just going to pick Nidalee. If you're playing a Skirmisher opener, you usually want to be playing UDYR and Kennen. If you don't get Kennen, you can play Trundle as well, but in my opinion, Kennen is the better unit, so you want to be playing Kennen. And you also want to be trying to 2-star your UDYR. Most of the time, you want to be stacking your UDYR with all your carry items instead of Nidalee, because usually it's way easier to 2-star your UDYR than your Nidalee, and a 2-star UDYR is going to be way stronger than a 1-star Nidalee. Some really strong items you can put on UDYR are Guinsoo's, Bloodthirster, Hodge, basically any items that give you attack speed or sustain, because UDYR scales really well off those items with the 3 Skirmisher buff. For your level 4, your next in could just be a second Dawnbringer if you're playing Nidalee, and for your level 5, you just play a second Brawler, something like a Warwick. So at level 7, if you find a Jax, you can move all your items from your UDYR into Jax and play around 6 Skirmishers. If not, you could also pivot your board into something else like APHELIOS or DRAVEN, because the items on UDYR are also very, very good on APHELIOS or DRAVEN, and you pivot your board into one of those comps at level 7 or 8. So now I'm going to be talking about the Renewer Opener. For the Renewer Opener, it's just 2 Renewer units plus 1. So the easiest Renewer Openers you get early are VLADIMIR and LISSANDRA, and for your second unit, you just play a random tanky unit. So in this case, I'm just going to pick GRAGAS. And then your next in is going to be a second Brawler because you're lacking frontline. Usually you want to be stacking your LISSANDRA with all your AP items and VLADIMIR with all your tank items. Additionally, if you don't get VLADIMIR, you just play SYNDRA, because SYNDRA gives you 2 Dawnbringer with GRAGAS while maintaining the 2 Renewer synergy. At level 5, you have the option to play 3 Coven because you have LISSANDRA, so you want LeBlanc in, and you want Morgana. This gives you 3 Coven, 2 Dawnbringers, and 2 Renewers. If you choose not to play Coven, you could also just play the 4 Dawnbringer variation, something like this, and for your level 6, you just splash in a second Brawler like Set. When you're playing Renewers, most of the time you're stacking all your AP items on LISSANDRA, so you're most likely going to be playing VELKOZ or Karma at level 7 or 8. So now I'm going to be talking about the Abomination Opener. So the Abomination trait is a 3-unit trait, which means that you're going to need KALISTA and Brand. So usually you're not actually going to be playing Abomination during the early game. But because you have NUNU, it's very, very easy to hit it later. But in the beginning, because you're playing NUNU, you just want to be playing a second Brawler like Warwick. And because you're playing Warwick, you want to round out your synergies with 3 Forgotten. Another variation to this, if you don't play Warwick, is if you play GRAGAS instead. If you're playing GRAGAS, you want a second Dawnbringer in, so KAZIX is a really, really good unit. And for your 4th unit, you could just play a second Assassin, something like a LeBlanc is good. And usually, if you're playing NUNU, what I like to do is pre-level for a higher chance of hitting Brand, because since KALISTA is a 1-star unit, it's very, very easy to hit the KALISTA. Brand is the hard unit to hit, but if you manage to get a Brand, you want to be playing 3 Abomination. And for your 5th unit, you could either play around your Spellweavers with Brand or play around KALISTA with 2 Legionnaires. So in this case, I'm just going to be playing 2 Legionnaires. And this board will give you 3 Abomination, 2 Dawnbringer, 2 Brawlers, and 2 Legionnaires. Some really good items you could slam are ZYRA on NUNU. I explained this before, but ZYRA is really good in Abomination. And for KALISTA, a really good item you can put on her is Bloodthirster, because Bloodthirster is not only good on KALISTA, but it's also really good on the Scion when he spawns. So depending on whether or not you stack KALISTA or Brand, if you're stacking KALISTA, you want to transfer your items into an AD comp like APHELIOS or DRAVEN or Jax. And if you're stacking Brand, you want to transfer over your items onto Karma or VELKOZ. Later on, if you hit a Rise, you can play 4 Abomination, which gives you the option to take in a random Mystic like Lux. So the last opener I'm going to be talking about is the Redeemed Opener. The Redeemed Opener consists of playing 3 Redeemed units. So in this case, I'm going to be playing VELKOZ, AATROX, and SYNDRA. I would only play this opener if I have SYNDRA and not VARUS, because I don't think VARUS is a very, very good unit, but SYNDRA by herself could deal a lot of damage on her own. And good items on SYNDRA are Blue Buff, Jewel Gauntlet, Death Cap, basically any AP items you can put on her. If you're playing this opener, usually you pivot this board into a VELKOZ or Karma board. For level 4, you want to play a second Legionnaire or your second Knight. In this case, I'm just going to be playing a second Knight. Something like a Thresh is good because you're lacking frontline. And for your level 5, you just play a second Legionnaire. Riven is okay. And for your level 6, you just play a random Dawnbringer to get 2 Dawnbringer since you're playing Riven. So now I'm just going to briefly run through all the late game boards that you could transition into. For the format of these late game boards, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you the base units that you need for the comp to work, like the base traits and the base units. And for your remaining units, it's honestly really, really flexible. You just put in whatever you 2-star. For DRAVEN, what you really, really need is 3 Forgotten and 2 Legionnaire, because it buffs up your DRAVEN, because DRAVEN is going to be your main carry. And for your remaining 3 units, you play whatever you hit. A good level 8 board that you could play without any legendaries is the following. You basically throw in a Diana because she's a lot of utility. Rel is just a really, really OP 4-cost unit. And Morgana gives you 2 Mystic and 2 Nightbringer. So for DRAVEN, his items are pretty flexible. In my opinion, the only real item you need on him is Bloodthirster to give him some sustain. The other 2 items, you could just play some random attack speed items like RFC and Guinsoo's. So at level 9, to uncap your board, you want to get rid of all your useless units like Thresh, Nautilus. So Thresh and Nautilus go out, and because you lose Thresh, you want a 3rd Forgotten unit. So Viego is good at level 9. And another really good unit you can put in late game is Kindred, because Kindred will not only give you 3 Mystic, but will also provide your Draven a lot more survivability to defend you against the VELKOZ and Karma players. So for APHELIOS, the core synergies are going to be 2 Nightbringers and 2 Rangers. Depending on what you hit, you could play 4 Rangers or 4 Nightbringers. Your level 8 board without any legendaries might look something like this. This gives you 4 Nightbringers and 2 Mystic and 2 Rangers. So for APHELIOS items, you need Bloodthirster on APHELIOS to give him some sustain. And another really good item on APHELIOS is Deathblade. Deathblade is good on APHELIOS because APHELIOS tags multiple units with his ulti. And then once those units die, because APHELIOS participated in the kill, Deathblade is going to give APHELIOS 80 for all 4 units that died. So usually if you get Deathblade, you want to play more towards APHELIOS instead of Draven, because APHELIOS is going to benefit a lot more from Deathblade. If you don't have Deathblade, you actually usually want to play towards Draven more, because Draven is going to be stronger. But honestly, it just comes down to which 4 costs you hit, APHELIOS or Draven. Both use similar items, it's just that Deathblade is a lot better on APHELIOS than Draven. For your third item, you just play a random attack speed item like a Guinsoo's or a RFC. So at level 9, you want to get rid of all your useless units. So Sejuani goes out, ASHE goes out, and you want to put in legendaries instead. So because you took out Sejuani, you want a 4th Nightbringer, so Darius is good. And because you took out ASHE, you want a 2nd Ranger, so Kindred is good. And for your last unit, it's actually really flex. If there's a lot of AP players, you could just play a 4th Mystic like Lux. Or if there's a lot of AD players, you could just play another Ironclad. Or if you simply need more damage, you could just play something like a Heimer. Really flexible comp. The only thing you really need is 2 Rangers and 2 Nightbringers. So now I'm going to be talking about the Jax board. So the Jax board, it's honestly a bit weaker than all the other comps, but Jax is a very good board you could roll for at level 7. Because you're most likely going to hit 6 Skirmishers and 1 copy of Jax if you roll down at level 7, and it's a pretty good top 4 comp. The only real item you need is Bloodthirster on Jax. The other 2 items are really flexible, but I think RFC, Runans, and Bloodthirster is a really good combination on Jax. So at level 8, your next in is just going to be a Rel. So usually at level 9, you're just going to play a Diana to round out your 4 Dragon Slayer synergy. But if you're in a situation where you could play for first place and you're high rolling super hard, you actually want to pivot out of 6 Skirmishers to play better units. So in this case, you want Lee Sin out, Cannon out, and you want Nidalee out, and you just want to play 5 cost legendaries. So your level 9 board might look something like this. This gives you 4 Dragon Slayer, 3 Skirmisher, and a lot of other utility units like Rise, Kindred, Darius. And what this board does is it allows you to play for first place instead of playing 6 Skirmishers, because in my opinion, 6 Skirmishers is sort of the cheap version of the Jax build. For your late game board, you actually want to play around something like this with legendary units. So on to the AP boards. One of the really strong AP boards is Karma. The core to Karma is 2 Dawnbringers, 2 Invokers, and 2 Renewers, and this could easily be achieved from Karma, Ivern, and Soraka. So usually you want to look for frontline units to fill in all the remaining unit slots. Your level 8 board without any legendaries might look something like this. For items, the one item you absolutely need to play Karma is blue buff. Without blue buff, Karma is very underwhelming. So if you don't have blue buff and you have AP items, you usually want to play around VELKOZ instead. But if you have blue buff, you could look to play around Karma. For your remaining 2 item slots, you just play 2 random items that give you more damage or survivability. So Jewel Gauntlet is good, Gunblade is good, Deathcap is good, GA is good. Just depends on your items, she's pretty flexible. The only real item you need on Karma is blue buff. At level 9, to uncap your board, you want to remove all your useless units. So Soraka's out, Lux is out, Thresh is out, Nautilus is out. And then your board might end up looking something like this. So late game Karma might have some trouble killing off the enemy team because she won't do enough damage. So you can consider playing a secondary carry if it reaches late game. A good secondary carry you could play is VELKOZ or Kayle. If you have good AP items, you could stack VELKOZ. If you have a lot of attack speed items, you could stack Kayle. Kayle could be your secondary win condition if you're playing Karma. So now I'm going to be talking about the reroll Draconic board. In the reroll Draconic board, you're going to be playing a Draconic backline with ZYRA carry. Good items on her are Shojin and Guinsoo's, and you want to be trying to 3-star your ZYRA from all the eggs that you get from the Draconic trait. A good frontline you can play is the 3 Abomination frontline with 1 ZYRA on each one. It's just a super broken frontline, and it often enables you to get to level 8 or level 9 with a lot of HP, giving you enough time to hit your 3-star ZYRA safely. Once you're at level 9, you can consider dropping your useless units. So for example, ASHE could go out, Set could go out. You could consider playing 4 Spellweavers, something like this. If you reach level 9, you could consider dropping your Abomination frontline to just play better units like Garen, Rel, Volibear, Taric, basically all legendary units to uncap your board. So finally, the last comp I'm going to be talking about is VELKOZ. It's another AP comp, and the core to VELKOZ is just 3 redeemed and 2 Spellweavers. 3 redeemed comes from Rel, Lux, and VELKOZ, and the second Spellweaver you can play is ZYRA. Your level 8 board without any legendaries might look something like this. Some really good items you can put on VELKOZ is Jewel Gauntlet. Gunblade is also good, it gives him some sustain. If you don't get Gunblade, you can just put a random AP or survivability on him, like another Death Cap, or Hodge, or GA. You could also put something like a blue buff on him for faster casts, or if not blue buff, you could put a Shogun on him. VELKOZ is pretty flexible, just put whatever AP items on him, and what he does is he usually just one-shots the enemy team. Just make sure your VELKOZ is on the opposite side of their carry, and you're all set. So at level 9, to uncap your board, you want to get rid of all your useless units, and your level 9 board might end up looking something like this. Since set 5 still hasn't started yet, a lot of things could still change really quickly once the meta sets in, but I think this list is a pretty accurate representation of what's strong right now in the meta. Once the meta changes again, I'll update you guys with another video, so be sure to like and subscribe to be updated on what the best boards are. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.